The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt of Virginia, a city whose heart beat to the rhythm of the world's largest naval base. Jamila Washington adjusted her black apron over her uniform at the Seaside Diner, a family restaurant a few miles from the naval base, while tying her curly hair into a tight bun. At 25, she had an easy smile and unwavering determination, even when the weight of fatigue pressed down on her shoulders after double shifts. The restaurant was one of those typical American establishments with weathered red leather bar stools, a vintage jukebox in the corner that occasionally worked when someone ventured to drop in a coin, and the lingering aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the smell of toast and bacon. On the walls, American Navy pennants shared space with black and white photographs of ships that had made history. The clientele was diverse: sailors on leave, local families, and curious tourists seeking an authentic taste of American cuisine before visiting the imposing USS Wisconsin, the museum battleship anchored nearby. Jamila had started working at Seaside 2 years prior, initially as a temporary job while she finished her bachelor's degree in environmental engineering at Old Dominion University. Graduation had been 6 months earlier, but the realities of the job market for recent graduates and the bills that kept piling up forced her to stay longer than she had planned. Meanwhile, she sent out resumes every week to environmental consulting firms and government agencies, dreaming of the day she could apply her knowledge to preserve the marine ecosystems she had loved since childhood. That Thursday had begun like any other. The morning had been quiet, with the regulars Jamila knew by name and by their rarely changing orders. Mr. Peterson, with his black coffee and toast without butter; Mrs. Garcia, with her omelette and a glass of orange juice; Lieutenant Collins, who always ordered waffle with extra maple syrup and read the newspaper silently for almost an hour before leaving a generous tip. But the afternoon shift brought a different energy. A group of executives occupied the restaurant's largest table, clearly coming from elsewhere, perhaps from one of the many conferences taking place at the nearby convention center. Among them was Edward Brennan, a middle-aged man with graying hair at the temples and an impeccably tailored suit that contrasted with the restaurant's casual atmosphere. While most regulars treated the staff with respect and familiarity, there was something in the way Brennan looked at Jamila that sent an uncomfortable shiver down her spine. "Hey, watch out for that guy at table 8, murmured Tom, one of the Seaside's most senior waitresses, as she quickly passed Jamila carrying a tray of sodas. He sent the same dish back 3 times because, according to him, it wasn't perfect, and he doesn't even give a decent tip." Jamila nodded, discreetly, mentally preparing herself. Unfortunately, it wasn't the first time she'd dealt with difficult clients, and she doubted it would be the last. In a predominantly white environment like Norfolk, she had already faced her share of microaggressions and veiled prejudices. Her mother, Commander Elaine Washington, one of the few black women to achieve that rank in the U.S. Navy, had taught her from an early age to navigate these spaces with dignity, intelligence, and an inner strength that Jamila carried like a shield. Excuse me, waitress." Brennan's voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant, his index finger raised impatiently in the air. He didn't even wait for Jamila to fully reach the table before starting to speak. "This steak is practically mooing. I ordered it well done. Well done. Is that so hard to understand?" "I apologize, sir," Jamila replied with a professional calm that masked her discomfort. "I'll take it back to the kitchen immediately and make sure it's prepared to your liking." As she turned to take the plate, she felt fingers gripping her wrist. The unexpected and unwelcome touch made her freeze. "Not so fast," Brennan's, his voice low but laden with an authority he was clearly used to wielding. "I want to speak to your manager. This is unacceptable. This is the second time my order has come back wrong." Jamila felt the other customer's stares on her as she delicately tried to free her arm. "I'll call Mr. Richards immediately, sir. As soon as I take your plate to the kitchen." Brennan released her wrist with a brusque movement, looking her up and down in a way that made Jamila feel naked and exposed. The other men at the table seemed uncomfortable, some glancing at their plates or checking their cell phones, as if they wanted to distance themselves from their colleagues' behavior. 5 minutes later, Timothy Richards, the manager of the Seaside, a man in his 40s with a perpetually nervous smile and premature balding, approached Brennan's table with Jamila a few steps behind, holding a fresh plate with the well-done steak. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Timothy Richards, manager of the Seaside Diner. I understand there was a problem with your order. I'd like to apologize for the inconvenience and inform you that we've prepared a new dish exactly as requested. The meal will be on the house, of course." Brennan barely glanced at the manager, his eyes fixed on Jamila. "The problem isn't just the food, it's the service." His tone made it clear that service specifically meant Jamila. "This waitress has been incompetent since we arrived. First, she took a long time to take our orders. Then, she brought Mr. Thompson the wrong drink. And now, she can't even properly communicate to the kitchen how I want my steak." Jamila took a deep breath, aware of the heat rising up her neck. The accusations were unfair and fabricated. She had written down the orders as soon as the group was seated, and she was absolutely certain she hadn't made any mistakes with the drinks. As for the steak, the bill clearly stated "well done" in her meticulous handwriting. Mr. Richards glanced nervously at Jamila, then at Brennan, clearly pondering how to defuse the situation without losing clients who appeared to be executives from a major company. "Sir, we reviewed the order and verified that it was correctly noted as well done," Jamila said respectfully, trying to defend herself without sounding defiant. "There may have been a misunderstanding in the kitchen, for which I sincerely apologize." Brennan's face flushed. "Are you calling me a liar, girl?" The word "girl" came out laden with condescension and something more sinister, causing some of the other restaurant patrons, who were now watching the scene unfold, to shift uncomfortably in their seat. "Not at all, sir," Jamila replied, maintaining her composure. "I'm just clarifying that I noted your request as asked." Mr. Brennan, the manager, interjected quickly, "Please accept our apology. As I said, the meal is on us. If you prefer, I can assign another employee to serve your table for the remainder of the meal." Brennan smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, I'd prefer this waitress to keep serving us. I want to see if she can do at least one thing right today." The tone was unmistakably provocative, almost as if he were looking for a stronger reaction from Jamila. Richards seemed increasingly nervous, running a hand over his forehead now glistening with sweat. "Jamila is one of our best employees, Mr. Brennan. I'm sure the rest of your service will be impeccable." "Jamila?" Brennan repeated the name, deliberately mispronouncing it. "Interesting name. Where does it come from? Doesn't sound American." The implication was clear. Despite being born and raised in Norfolk as the daughter of a Navy officer who served his country for over 20 years, her American identity and belonging were being questioned because of her black skin and a name that Brennan considered foreign. "It's a name of African origin, sir," Jamila replied politely, though her voice had acquired a firmness that hadn't been present before. "It means beautiful in Swahili. And I'm American, born and raised here in Norfolk." Brennan replied, still with that cold smile. "Beautiful. Interesting." His eyes scanned Jamila's body again in a way that made his stomach churn. "Is there anything else I can bring you?" Jamila asked, trying to steer the conversation back to the professional aspect. "Not for now," Brennan replied, finally cutting a piece of the new steak. "But stick around. I'm sure I'll need something soon." Jamila nodded and stepped away, feeling her legs tremble slightly. It was as if Brennan had marked his territory, establishing a small battlefield at that restaurant table where he could exert power and control over her. For the next hour, Brennan found excuses to call Jamila over to the table for trivial reasons: an extra napkin, more sauce, a glass of water with exactly 3 ice cubes. No more, no less. Each request was accompanied by condescending comments and intrusive glances, while his table mates seemed increasingly uncomfortable with his behavior. In one of these interactions, when Jamila bent down to pick up an empty glass, Brennan murmured something only she could hear. "You know, you're wasting your potential waiting tables. A pretty girl like you could earn so much more, elsewhere. I'm staying at the Marriott, room 712. Jamila felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. The sexual innuendo was too explicit to ignore, yet subtle enough that she couldn't openly accuse him without seeming to exaggerate. She straightened up, took a deep breath, and walked away without responding. trying to process the anger and humiliation building inside her. As she approached the waiter's station, Tanya noticed his expression. "Hey, are you okay? That idiot is bothering you, isn't he?" His brown eyes were full of genuine concern. "I'm handling the situation," Jamila replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "Just another hour, and they'll probably leave. You shouldn't have to deal with harassment." "Jamila," Tanya replied, lowering her voice so only the two of them could hear. "Have you spoken to Richards yet?" Jamila glanced at the manager, who was busy answering a phone call in the office, visible through the half-open door. "You know Richards. He gets nervous just thinking about confronting a client, especially one who seems to have money." The restaurant door bell rang, announcing the arrival of new customers. Reflexively, both looked in that direction. Jamila felt a wave of relief and, at the same time, concern upon recognizing the figure entering. Elaine. Washington walked into the seaside diner with the poise of someone accustomed to commanding ships and leading teams of hundreds of sailors. At 53, Commander Washington was an imposing presence even in civilian clothes, black dress pants and a navy blue button-down shirt that matched the small navy insignia she always wore on her lapel. Her gray hair was styled in an impeccable bun, similar to her daughter's, but without the unruly strands that escaped around Jamila's face after hours of work. It was unusual for her mother to show up at the restaurant unannounced. Usually, when she wasn't at sea, Commander Washington spent her days at the Norfolk Naval Base, returning home only in the late afternoon. Jamila quickly checked her watch. It was only 2:30 in the afternoon. "Mom?" Jamila approached, surprise evident in her voice. "Did something happen?" Commander Washington smiled, that warm smile that contrasted with her military bearing. "Nothing to worry about, dear. The meeting with the Admiral ended early, and I thought I'd stop by for coffee before heading back to base. Also," she added in a lower tone, "I wanted to confirm our dinner tonight, remember? To celebrate your interview at the EPA on Monday." Jamila smiled genuinely for the first time that afternoon. After months of searching, she had finally landed an interview at the Environmental Protection Agency for a junior environmental analyst position, specifically focused on water quality in the Chesapeake Bay. "Of course, I haven't forgotten. I'll be home at 7 as soon as my shift is over." She guided her mother to an empty table. "Black coffee with a spoonful of sugar, right? You know how I like it," the commander replied with a smile, sitting down and placing her leather bag on the chair beside her. Then, her smile faded slightly as she noticed something in her daughter's expression. "Is everything all right, Jamila? You seem ... tense." Before Jamila could respond, Brennan's voice cut through the air. "Waitress! I need attention here!" He snapped his fingers in the air, a deliberately degrading gesture that caused several customers to look in his direction disapprovingly. Jamila closed her eyes for a second, gathering her strength. "I need to attend to that table, Mom. I'll be back in a minute with your coffee." Commander Washington nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly as she turned to observe the man who had called her daughter by that name. Jamila approached Brennan's desk, maintaining a neutral expression. "Yes, sir? How can I help you?" Finally, Brennan said sarcastically, "We're ready for the bill, and I hope you've included the discount for the terrible service." He raised his empty glass, and this bourbon was far too diluted. "Tell your bartender to learn how to pour a decent drink. I'll get your bill ready immediately." "Sir?" Jamila replied mechanically, resisting the urge to explain that the seaside didn't have a bartender. It was a family restaurant with a small selection of alcoholic beverages, and that the bourbon was served in standardized measures. As he turned to get the bill, Brennan added loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "And maybe next time you could hire people who actually understand English and know how to treat important clients." The racist comment hit her like a whip. Jamila stopped, feeling the blood pounding in her ear. Years of advice from her mother about keeping her composure, about not giving racists what they wanted, a reaction echoed in her mind. But so did the teachings about dignity and not allowing anyone to treat her as less than she was. Slowly, she turned to face Brennan, whose expression showed a cruel satisfaction, as if she had finally managed to push her beyond the limit. "Sir," Jamila began, her voice surprisingly firm, I speak fluent English, as well as Spanish and a little French that I learned during my bachelor's degree in environmental engineering. I perfectly understood each of your requests today, including your inappropriate insinuation. I will treat all customers with respect, but I expect the same in return. Brennan's face contorted in fury, unaccustomed to being confronted, especially by someone he saw as in, "How dare you? Where's your manager? I'll make sure you're fired today." He stood up, his chair scraping noisily against the floor, creating a scene that now had the attention of the entire restaurant. Mr. Richards emerged quickly from his office, panic evident on his face as he made his way to the table. "What's the problem, sir?" the manager asked, alternating nervous glances between Brennan and Jamila. "The problem," Brennan spat out the words, "is that your employee just insulted me. I demand she be fired immediately." "I didn't insult you," Jamila replied calmly. "I only asked for mutual respect." "Mr. Richards," Brennan turned to the manager, completely ignoring Jamila. "Is this how you train your employee? To talk back to customers? To make false accusations?" The manager, visibly uncomfortable, stepped between Jamila and Brennan. "Sir, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Jamila is one of our most dedicated employees, and misunderstanding?" Brennan interrupted. "She practically accused me of harassment. I'm a respected executive with a wife and children. How dare she insinuate something so absurd?" It was at that moment that Jamila felt a presence beside her. Her mother had stood up and was now standing next to her, with the same upright and dignified posture she maintained on the deck of a ship. "Excuse me," Commander Washington said, her voice calm but carrying that authoritative tone that made sailors instinctively salute. "It seems there's a problem here. I'm Elaine Washington, Jamila's mother." Brennan glanced at the commander, momentarily disconcerted by the unexpected interruption. His eyes moved from mother to daughter, clearly noticing the resemblance, but also registering the posture and presence emanating from the older woman. "Ma'am, this is between me and the management of this establishment," Brennan said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Your daughter was completely disrespectful and incompetent throughout our lunch." Commander Washington raised an eyebrow, a gesture Jamila knew well it was the same one she made when she was about to dismantle a weak argument from a subordinate. "Interesting," she said. "I've been observing for the last few minutes. I saw my daughter politely approach your table. I heard you snap your fingers to call her over, as if you were calling an animal. And then I heard your comment about people who understand English, which sounds remarkably prejudiced to me." Brennan's face flushed red with anger. "Who do you think you are?" "Commander Elaine Washington, United States Navy," she replied simply, without raising her voice, but with a firmness that made Brennan unconsciously take a half-step back. "I have served this country for 26 years. My daughter was born while I was on active, grew up on naval bases across the country, saw me leave for 3 combat missions, and still managed to graduate with honors in engineering. So, when I hear someone question her professionalism, her intelligence, or her right to be treated with dignity, I confess I am ... intrigued." The restaurant had fallen into absolute silence. Even the jukebox seemed to have chosen that moment to pause between songs. One of Brennan's table mates, a younger man with thin-rimmed glasses, stood up awkwardly. "Edward, I think we should go. Have that conference in..." "Stay out of this, Parker," Brennan growled, without taking her eyes off the command. Then, turning to the manager, who seemed to want to disappear into the floor, "I want to speak to the owner of this place." "Now, I'm the owner." A new voice joined the conversation. An elderly man with white hair and wearing an apron emerged from the kitchen. Frank Winters, the founder of the Seaside Diner, rarely appeared in the restaurant area, preferring to leave the day-to-day management to Richards while he oversaw the kitchen. "Mr. Winters," Richards began, the relief evident in his voice at not having to deal with the situation alone. "I've heard enough," Winters, his voice hoarse but firm. He turned to Brennan. "Sir, at the Seaside, we have 2 rules. We serve good food and we treat people with respect. It seems we've followed the first part since you ate all your steak. As for the second part, I'm afraid you haven't followed our policy." Brennan seemed unable to believe what he was hearing. "You're on her side, eh? Simple waitress." "Jamila isn't just a waitress," Winters replied. She's a brilliant woman who works here while building her future. She's a valuable part of our team. And yes, I'm on her side. Now, your bill has already been paid by your colleagues. I suggest you. Brennan looked around, searching for allies, but found only disapproving expressions. His own coworkers seemed mortified, several of them already on their clearly eager to leave as quickly as possible. The executive grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, tucked it under his arm, and marched toward the door, not without first casting one last venomous glance at Jamila. "This isn't over," he muttered as he walked past her. "I have connections. You'll never work anywhere decent in this city." Commander Washington stepped forward, placing herself partially between Brennan and her daughter. "That sounded like a threat, sir. Would you like to clarify?" Something in the commander's firm gaze made Brennan reconsider. Without another word, he left the restaurant, the door slamming shut behind him. A momentary silence fell over the seaside, broken seconds later by a wave of spontaneous applause from the other patrons. Several uniformed sailors at a table near the window rose in respect for Captain Washington, who nodded in recognition. Mr. Winters approached Jamila, genuine concern etched on his wrinkled face. "Are you all right, my dear? I'm so sorry you had to go through that." "I'm fine, Mr. Winters," Jamila replied, though her hands still trembled slightly. "Thank you for defending me," his mother commented softly beside him. "Because if he hadn't done that, I would have had to have a serious talk with the management of this establishment." The comment brought a genuine smile to Jamila's face, relieving some of the tension that had built up in her shoulders. Commander Richards approached nervously. "I sincerely apologize for what happened. If there's anything we can, That coffee my daughter was going to bring me would be wonderful right now. And perhaps a slice of that apple pie you make so well." The manager nodded quickly, clearly relieved by such a simple request. Of course. On the house, naturally. "That won't be necessary," the commander replied firmly. "I'll pay for what I consume, just like any other customer." As Richards walked away, Jamila turned to her mother. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" The commander smiled, that warm smile reserved only for private moments with her daughter. "Years commanding ships in crisis situations teach you to choose your words carefully." She put her arm around Jamila's shoulders. "Besides, I think he didn't expect to find not one, but two black women who wouldn't be intimidated by his tactics." Jamila felt a surge of pride as she looked at her mother. Since childhood, Elaine Washington had been her role model of strength, dignity, and perseverance. As one of the few black women to reach the rank of commander in the Navy, she had navigated treacherous waters of prejudice and sexism with an unwavering determination that Jamila had always admired. "Hey, Jamila," Tanya called from the waitstaff station. "You can take 15 minutes. I'll cover your table." Jamila nodded gratefully and guided her mother back to the table where they had been sitting before the incident. The two sat down, and for a moment, they simply breathed, letting the adrenaline of the confrontation dissipate. "You know," the commander began after a moment, "when you were little and we moved from base to base, I always worried about how you would handle the inevitable prejudice you would face, if you would be strong enough. And did I go?" Jamila asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice that she rarely let show. "My dear," her mother replied, covering her hand with hers, "you were far stronger than I could ever have expected. Today I saw you maintain your dignity in the face of a provocateur. I saw you defend yourself without losing control. And I saw you do it alone even before I intervened." The pride in her voice was palpable. "You are not strong despite the challenges you faced. You are strong because of them." Tanya appeared with 2 cups of coffee and a generous slice of apple pie with 2 spoons. "I thought you might want to share," she said with a smile. "Thank you, Tanya," Jamila replied, genuinely grateful for the gesture. When they were alone again, the commander took a sip of her coffee and looked thoughtfully at her daughter. "So, how are you feeling about the interview on Monday?" The change of subject was welcome, allowing Jamila to focus on the future instead of the unpleasant incident. "Nervous, but prepared. I reviewed all the relevant environmental legislation for the Chesapeake Bay and put together a portfolio with my university research on the bioaccumulation of heavy metals in oysters. That's my girl." The commander smiled. Always 3 steps ahead. I learned from the best, Jamila replied, returning the smile. I remember you telling me that, in the Navy, preparation isn't half the battle, it's the whole battle. And I still believe that. Although, her mother added with a twinkle in her eye, sometimes life throws you situations for which no amount of preparation is enough. It's in those moments that we discover what we're really made of. Jamila thought about the confrontation with Brennan, the veiled threats, the way he had tried to belittle her. Instead of feeling intimidated, she realized she felt stronger, more resolute. You know what, Mom? I think today was one of those moments. The commander observed her daughter attentively, noticing the subtle change in her posture, the renewed confidence in her eyes. I agree. And you passed with honor. They shared the pie in comfortable silence, watching the restaurant's normal routine gradually return around them. Customers resumed their conversations. The jukebox started playing Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and staff circulated among the tables, serving coffee and clearing plates. When the clock struck 3, Commander Washington checked her watch and sighed. I need to get back to base. I still have a meeting with the promotions committee this afternoon. Sure, Jamila replied. I'll see you at home later for dinner. Her mother stood up, placed a $20 bill on the table well over the cost of the coffee and leaned down to kiss Jamila's forehead. I'm proud of you, darling. I always have been. As she watched her mother leave the restaurant, Jamila felt a sense of calm and determination settle over her. The incident with Brennan hadn't broken her. On the contrary, it had solidified something within her, a certainty that she could face any obstacle that came her way. 3 days later, Jamila walked into the EPA regional office in Norfolk for her interview. She wore a professional navy blue suit she had bought especially for the occasion, and carried a briefcase containing copies of her resume, certificate, and that meticulously prepared portfolio about her work with Chesapeake Bay oysters. The receptionist smiled as she checked her name on the list. Ms. Washington, the interview committee is waiting for you in the conference room. Please go down this corridor to the right. Upon entering the room, Jamila saw 3 people, seated behind a long table, 2 women and a man, all formally dressed and with professional, yet welcoming expressions. Ms. Washington, welcome, the woman in the center began, rising to shake her hand. I'm Dr. Patel, Regional Director of Aquatic Research. These are my colleague, Dr. Chun, a coastal ecosystem specialist, and Dr. Rodriguez, our coordinator of initiatives for the Chesapeake Bay. Jamila shook hands with each of them, noting with relief that they all had genuine smiles. It was a welcome change after the treatment she had received from Brennan a few days earlier. Please, have a seat, Dr. Patel indicated the chair in front of them. We are very interested in your work on the bioaccumulation of heavy metals in oysters. In fact, we have a project starting next month that could benefit from exactly this type of research. As the interview progressed, Jamila felt her confidence grow. The questions were challenging but fair, focused on her knowledge, skills, and experience, not her appearance or background. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen for who she was, a competent scientist with much to contribute. When she left the building 2 hours later, the afternoon sun shone on the Chesapeake Bay, visible in the distance, its waters shimmering as if they contained millions of diamonds. Jamila took a deep breath of the salty air and smiled. Regardless of the outcome of the interview, she had presented herself with dignity and confidence, bringing with her not only her academic knowledge but also the strengths she had inherited from her mother and refined through her own experiences. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a message from his mother. How did it go? Jamila typed quickly. Very well. I'll tell you more at home. As she walked toward the bus stop, she reflected on the events of the past few days. The incident with Brennan, though unpleasant, had become a moment of clarity, a reminder that, as her mother always said, character is not formed during moments of comfort, but in the storms of life. A week later, Jamila received the call that would change her future. Dr. Patel, with evident enthusiasm in her voice, offered her not only the position she had applied for, but a higher position as a junior specialist in the oyster restoration project, with the possibility of development into a leadership role in the future. That night, as she sat with her mother on the porch of their small house in Norfolk, watching the starry sky and listening to the distant sound of the waves, Jamila felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the new job, but for the journey that had led her there. Every challenge, every obstacle, every Brennan she had faced had prepared her for this moment. "You know, Mom," she said as they shared a bottle of wine to celebrate, "when I think about everything that's happened, I realized that day at the restaurant was a turning point for me." Commander Washington raised an eyebrow. Inquisitively, "What do you mean?" "It was the first time I truly understood something you always tried to teach, that our dignity is not controlled by other people. It's within ourselves." Her mother smiled, her eyes shining with pride and emotion. "That's exactly it, darling. Exactly that." As they toasted to the future, Jamila knew for sure that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same grace and strength she had shown that day at the seaside diner, when an overbearing manager cornered a waitress and a black woman was in the restaurant, and her mother, a Navy commander, walked in seconds.